Good morning, students. We continue with our chapter number 3, what is government. The remaining topics, they are discussed here. The first topic, that is types of government. There are two types of government, democracy and monarchy. I repeat, there are two types of government, democracy and monarchy. First, about democracy. We have heard this word and we know that India, it is a democratic country. Democracy is followed, democracy is practiced in India. In democracy, we know that the government by the people, for the people and of the people. In short, the definition of democracy, the government by the people, for the people and of the people. We can say people is in center of democracy. People elect their representatives through periodic elections. In democracy, people elect their representatives. People elect their leaders through periodic elections. The representatives belong to a party in majority form the government. We know that in India we have been practicing democracy. Every 5 years there is Lok Sabha election as well as Legislative Assembly election. In that the majority party, the representatives of a majority party, they form the government. For example, from 2014 up to 2019, the BJP government, the Bharatiya Janata Party, has formed the government in India at national level. For next 5 years also, the same party got majority and form the government. So the representatives of political parties and the majority party, they form the government. Then the government, in democracy, the government has to explain its actions and defend its decision before the people. In democracy, the government has to explain its actions as well as to defend their decisions before the people, as the people is at center in democracy. In democratic government, whatever actions are taken by the government has to explain those actions before the people. Even the government has to defend its decisions before the people, as democracy, that is by the people, for the people and of the people. It means people is at the center of democracy. So people, they are well cared, they are looked after by the government. The second type of government, that is monarchy. In monarchy, the head of the government is either the king or the queen. In monarchy, the head of the government is either the king or the queen. He or she, whether the king or the queen, is the highest authority, is the supreme authority. Here in monarchy, though the queen or the king has a council of ministers to help and advise him or her, the final decision is taken by the monarch. The final decision is taken by the king or queen. In monarchy, the highest authority, the supreme authority, that is either the king or the queen. Though he or she has council of ministers to help or to advise him or her, but the final decision is taken by the monarch, is taken by the king or the queen. And another major difference between democracy and monarchy, that in monarchy the king or the queen, he is not responsible to the people for his or her actions. It means in monarchy the king or the queen does not have to answer the people for their actions or no need to defend their decisions. This is about monarchy. Two types of government, democracy and monarchy, they both are opposite to each other. So difference we can easily identify. In democracy, the highest authority, we can say, that is the people, is at the center. Whereas in monarchy, the king or the queen, he is the supreme or the highest authority. In democracy, the government has to explain its actions as well as to defend its decision before the people. Whereas in monarchy, the king or the queen doesn't have to explain his or her actions or defend his or her decision before the people. The next topic, that is democratic governance. The main feature, the main characteristic of democratic governments is the people have the power, the people have the power, the people have the authority to elect their leaders. The main feature, the main characteristic of the democratic governments is the people have the power to elect their leaders. It is a rule by the people. So we can say that democratic government, it is a rule by the people. Already I told you that democracy is by the people, for the people and of the people. People is at center in democracy. Besides that, the main idea of democracy is the people rule themselves indirectly, participating in the making of rules. The main idea of democracy is that the people of the country indirectly rule themselves, participating in the making of rules. Nowadays, these democratic governments, it is referred as representative democracies. I repeat, nowadays democratic governments are referred as representative democracies, as the people do not participate in government directly, but they elect their representatives, and those representatives, they form the government and they take care of the people. So indirectly the people participate in forming the government. That is why nowadays it is known as representative democracies. And the people, they elect their representatives, they elect their leaders through election process. And for election in democratic government, it allows universal adult franchise, which means universal adult franchise, it means all adults in the country have the right to vote after attaining a certain age. Universal adult franchise means all the adults of the country, they have right to vote in election after attaining a certain age, and this age in India, it is 18 years. After 18 years, an adult, he or she receives the right to vote in the elections. Even nowadays, already I have told you that democratic governments, it is now has become representative democracies, as the people do not participate directly in the government, but by electing their representatives, by electing their leaders, they form the government. We continue our topic democratic governments. In democratic government, universal adult franchise is followed, that every adult has the right to vote in the election when he or she attends at a certain age. And in India, the age is 18. But in earliest forms of democracy, this universal adult franchise was not followed. In earlier times, in earliest forms, the governments allowed only men who owned property and were educated to vote in the election. In the earliest forms of democracy, the governments gave permission only to men who were rich and educated to vote in the elections. It means women, poor and uneducated people, they were not given right to vote in the elections. So that was unfair. Based on education, based on literacy and wealth, voting right was given, that was unfair. So several people, including Gandhiji, they opposed this. They protested against this, that this was unfair. Even in India, only a small minority was allowed to vote. So several people, including Gandhiji, they were shocked due to this unfairness for giving voting right. So they protested. Gandhiji in 1931, in one of the journals, The Young India, he wrote an article about this unfairness of voting right, and he insisted that all adults have to vote in the election. That came to be known as universal adult franchise. Even not only in India but in different parts of Europe continent, in some of the countries of Europe, the women, they were deprived of this voting right. They were not allowed to vote in the elections. But after the First World War, women, they started movement to get the right to vote in the election. That movement came to be known as the suffrage movement. Suffrage, it means to vote, to right to vote. The suffrage movement started in different countries of Europe. Finally, in America, in 1920, the women were given right to vote in the election in 1920. And in UK, in 1928, the women were given right to vote in the election. So here we end our third chapter, what is government. We have studied about two types of government, democratic government and monarchy. We have also studied three levels of government, that is at national level, at state level and at local level. We have also studied three organs of the government, that is executive, legislature and judiciary. We have also studied about democratic governments now and in earlier